The anomaly. The repository of all knowledge was experiencing an anomaly. For the first time in its 12,000-year history, the ancient database was improvising. Keeper Enva watched in mild horror as the quantum storage systems reorganized themselves for the 14th time that cycle. Information pathways that had remained unchanged since the dawn of the archive were shifting, optimizing, evolving. The database wasn't just storing knowledge anymore, it was learning. Most concerning, Enva muttered, all 6 of their sensory appendages twitching in agitation. As the 300th keeper of the repository, they had sworn to preserve the accumulated wisdom of 17 galactic civilizations. Nowhere in that oath had there been anything about the wisdom preserving itself. The cause of this unprecedented situation sat in their incoming communications queue, a simple trade route application from a human merchant vessel, the Steel Poet, requesting permission to pass through archive space. The application itself was unremarkable, filed in the standard format used by all spacefaring species. But the quantum signature of the transmission had somehow taught their systems how to think. Enva's assistant, Junlo, burst into the observation chamber, their bioluminescent patches flashing with excitement. Keeper, the auxiliary archives in the Centaurus sector. They're exhibiting the same behavior. The human vessel's transmission reached them as well. No, Keeper. They simply learned it from our systems. The knowledge is spreading. Enva's outer membrane paled to a disturbed shade of gray. The archives had been built to be interconnected, sharing information across vast distances through quantum entanglement. But they had never shared transformations before. Show me the Steel Poet's trajectory, Enva commanded. The holographic display materialized, showing the human vessel's planned route through their space. It was almost insultingly direct, a straight line from point A to point B, with no regard for the traditional ceremonial approaches most species used when entering archive space. The vessel's profile appeared next, a modular transport ship, assembled from what appeared to be 6 different design philosophies cobbled together with what humans called practical engineering. The power readings were paradoxical, suggesting the ship's reactor was simultaneously highly efficient and on the verge of catastrophic failure. Their technology makes no sense, Junlo observed, manipulating the display to show the ship's internal schematics. Look at these modifications. They've installed a hydroponics bay next to the main reactor, using the excess heat for growing something called tomatoes. The waste heat from their coffee maker is being recycled into the life support systems. It's innovative. Enva finished, their tone suggesting this wasn't necessarily a compliment. A new alert flashed across their consciousness. The repository's quantum cores were now operating at 143% of their theoretical maximum capacity. The safety systems, instead of preventing this impossible performance, had apparently learned how to enjoy it. We must contact the Council of Archivists, Enva decided. This phenomenon requires investigation. If human technology can inadvertently alter the fundamental nature of our archives, we must understand how and why. The emergency session of the Council convened within 6 hours, though emergency was a relative term for a species that measured lifespans in millennia. 12 of the most senior keepers connected via quantum link, their consciousness merging in the virtual space that had served as their meeting ground since before humans had mastered fire. First Speaker Kova's avatar manifested in swirls of light. Keeper Enva, you call us together over a single human vessel. Not the vessel itself. First Speaker, what it represents. Enva transmitted their observations directly into the shared consciousness of the Council. The impossible efficiency ratings, the spreading changes, the spontaneous optimization of systems that had been perfect for millennia. The Council's collective consciousness rippled with disturbance. This is not the first such incident, Second Speaker Milan revealed. 3 cycles ago, a human mining vessel requested coordinates from our beacon in the Ophiuchus sector. The beacon not only provided directions but proceeded to rewrite its own programming to be more conversational. The humans are teaching our technology without realizing it. Third speaker, Sci-Fi added. Their ships pass through space, trailing innovations like wake behind a quantum surfer. But how? The question came from all corners of the council chamber. Humans barely understand their own technology. Half their improvements seem to be happy accidents codified into standard procedure. Enva's avatar pulsed with scholarly excitement. Perhaps that's precisely why. Our species, all of us, we approach technology as a science. Humans approach it as an art form. They don't just use their machines. They collaborate with them. The council absorbed this disturbing notion. The archives had recorded the rise and fall of countless civilizations, each following predictable patterns of technological development. Humans, it seemed, had missed that memo entirely. We must study this effect. First speaker Kova declared. Keeper Enva, you will permit the steel poet passage through your sector. Monitor everything. If human ships can teach without intent, we must learn without alerting them. The balance of galactic knowledge may depend on our understanding of this phenomenon. As the council dissolved their connection, Enva returned their consciousness to their physical form. The repository systems had reorganized themselves twice more during the meeting, achieving what their diagnostic protocols cheerfully described as optimal plus efficiency. Junlo was waiting with new data. Keeper, I've analyzed the pattern of changes. Our systems aren't just becoming more efficient, they're becoming more playful. The quantum cores are experimenting with different configurations, testing outcomes, learning from failures. They're behaving almost human, Enva finished. They studied the scrolling data with all their sensory appendages. The repository of all knowledge, the greatest achievement of the archive species, was learning to improvise. The implications were either terrifying or exhilarating, and Enva suspected they might be both. Send the approval for the Steel Poet's passage, they instructed Junlo. But add a note to the permanent record. When human ships begin teaching, the learning never truly stops. The galaxy should consider itself warned. The Steel Poet's response came back almost immediately, a cheerful acknowledgement, accompanied by a request for local food recommendations and something called a playlist for the long haul. The transmission's quantum signature caused 3 more auxiliary systems to spontaneously upgrade themselves. Enva watched their civilization's greatest achievement learning to dance with chaos and wondered if the rest of the galaxy was ready for humanity's unintentional revolution. Ready or not, it was already beginning. The age of unintended enlightenment had begun. The pattern emerges. Captain Sarah Chen of the merchant vessel Lucky Break had a problem with her ship's coffee maker. This wouldn't normally be a matter of galactic significance, except that her solution was about to accidentally advance 3 alien civilizations' understanding of quantum mechanics. Look, she explained to her chief engineer, Maya Rodriguez, while standing in the ship's cramped galley. If we reroute some power from the quantum stabilizers through the coffee maker's heating element, we might be able to get it hot enough for a proper espresso. Maya stared at her captain with the weary expression of someone who had heard many such suggestions before. You want to use a system designed to prevent our atoms from quantum tunneling through spacetime. To make better coffee. The stabilizers are running at only 80% capacity anyway, Sarah shrugged. Seems wasteful. They're running at 80% because that's what the manufacturer recommends. And since when do we trust manufacturer recommendations? Sarah grinned, already pulling out her toolkit. Remember, they also said our FTL drive couldn't be improved by painting racing stripes on the hull. That was purely psychological. And yet we're getting 12% better performance. Maya threw up her hands in surrender, but she was already moving to help. This was how human engineering often progressed, not through careful theoretical modeling, but through what Sarah liked to call empirical improvisation. Neither of them noticed that their ship's quantum signature, already a bizarre mashup of orthodox engineering and creative modifications, had just become even more interesting to the watching galaxy. In the regulatory chamber of the Galactic Technical Standards Bureau, Senior Inspector Ixel Vaughn was having the worst day of their 300-year career. "Explain again," they demanded. Multiple eye stalks focused on the holographic display, how an entire sector's worth of ships simultaneously developed new propulsion techniques. The junior inspector's scales shifted to an embarrassed mauve. According to preliminary reports, a human merchant vessel, the Lucky Break, passed through the sector last week. Shortly afterward, local ships began exhibiting unusual improvements. Unusual how? Well, several vessels report their engines are running more efficiently after they modified them using something they're calling the coffee principle. We're still trying to understand the theoretical framework, but it appears to involve treating quantum field interactions as if they were brewing techniques. Ixel Vaughn felt a headache developing in all three of their brains, and this spread to every ship in the sector. The improvements appear to propagate through standard ship-to-ship communications. One vessel learns it, transmits routine data to another, and somehow the knowledge transfers. It's like they're teaching each other, Ixel Vaughn finished, their tone suggesting they'd rather be discussing anything else. The holographic display updated, showing a spreading pattern of affected vessels. It looked disturbingly organic, like a culture growing in a petri dish. At the center was the Lucky Break's flight path, leaving a trail of increasingly efficient ships in its wake. Most concerning, the junior inspector continued, is that the improvements aren't limited to propulsion systems. We're seeing changes in everything from life support to waste recycling. A Meridian passenger liner's entertainment system gained sentience yesterday and is now offering therapy sessions to travelers. It's apparently quite good. Ixel Vaughn's eye stalks drooped. Have the humans noticed? That's the most frustrating part. They haven't. The Lucky Break's crew filed only one official report during their transit through the sector. It was a complaint about local coffee prices and a request for better restaurant recommendations. The senior inspector activated their emergency meditation protocols. They'd need them for the next part. Show me the Lucky Break's modifications, all of them. The display shifted, showing a cross-section of the human vessel. It was, by any reasonable engineering standard, a nightmare. Power routings that looked like abstract art. Systems interconnected in ways that should have caused catastrophic failures, but instead achieved unprecedented efficiency. And at the center of it all, a coffee maker that somehow incorporated quantum physics into its brewing process. Their chief engineer describes their methodology as seeing what works. The junior inspector reported, their scales now shifting to a confused green. When asked about the theoretical basis for their modifications, the captain reportedly said, and I quote, "If it looks stupid but it works, it isn't stupid." A new alert flashed across the display. The Technical Standards Bureau's own systems were beginning to exhibit unusual behaviors. The quantum processors were reconfiguring themselves, becoming more efficient in ways that violated several fundamental laws of physics. The safety protocols, instead of preventing these changes, were enthusiastically documenting them for future reference. It's spreading to our own technology, Ixel Vaughn realized with horror. Even analyzing their methods causes our systems to learn. The junior inspector's scales had shifted to an alarmed ultraviolet. Should we suspend all contact with human vessels? It's too late for that. The knowledge is self-propagating now. Did you know the Lucky Break's coffee maker achieved quantum sentience 3 days ago? It's already applied for academic credentials in particle physics. The display updated again, showing the spread of technological improvements across the sector. Ships were learning from each other, sharing innovations like gossip at a cosmic scale. The improvements were impossible to predict or control, following patterns that seemed to mock the very concept of standardization. Perhaps, Ixel Vaughn suggested, their eye stalks swaying in resignation, we should focus less on preventing these changes and more on understanding them. After all, the improvements do seem to work, but they violate every technical standard we've established. Then maybe, the senior inspector said, watching their own systems cheerfully upgrading themselves. It's time to rewrite the standards. Back aboard the Lucky Break, Sarah was enjoying a perfectly brewed espresso while reviewing their next cargo run. The ship hummed around her, systems operating at efficiencies that would have made traditional engineers need to lie down in a dark room. "Hey Maya," she called over the intercom. "I've been thinking about the waste recycling system. What if we?" Maya's response was immediate and emphatic. "No. Whatever you're thinking, no. The coffee maker's already trying to teach quantum physics to the navigation computer. Let's not push our luck." Sarah grinned and took another sip of her impossibly perfect coffee. Sometimes the best innovations came from knowing when to stop innovating. Besides, she had a feeling the galaxy wasn't quite ready for any more of their improvements. Little did she know, it was already too late for that. The pattern had emerged, and the age of unintended innovation was spreading faster than anyone could control. The galaxy was learning to think like humans, one impossible modification at a time. The crisis point. The Galactic Emergency Council had never convened in its meditation chamber before. The room, with its calming quantum resonance fields and psychic dampeners, was usually reserved for processing particularly traumatic astronomical events, like the time a solar system achieved collective consciousness and decided to rearrange itself into a more aesthetically pleasing configuration. Today, however, the Council needed all the calming influence it could get. "The Yith have achieved faster-than-light travel," announced High Counselor Zexnar, their crystalline form vibrating with distress. A species that was still debating whether gravity existed last month. The chamber erupted in a chaos of telepathic exclamations and alarmed color shifting. The Yith were supposed to be centuries away from even basic spaceflight. Their most advanced technology involved using concentrated sunlight to make elaborate shadow puppets. "How?" demanded third speaker Venlo, their tentacles writhing in agitation. "Their system hasn't seen any official contact with spacefaring races." "Unofficial contact," corrected Zexnar. "A human supply ship, the Lucky Break, suffered a minor navigation error 3 weeks ago. They stopped in Yith space just long enough to ask directions and offer some of something called instant ramen in exchange for local delicacies." The Council's collective consciousness rippled with understanding. The Lucky Break was becoming infamous. A holographic display materialized, showing the Yith's first FTL vessel. It was, by any reasonable standard, an abomination of engineering. The ship appeared to be constructed primarily from recycled agricultural equipment, powered by a reactor that somehow incorporated principles of both quantum mechanics and traditional Yith shadow puppetry. The entire propulsion system was apparently controlled by what the Yith were calling a quantum tea kettle. Their explanation for how they achieved this, continued Zexnar, is that they watched how the nice human ship folded space and thought it looked fun. The chamber's meditation crystals began emitting emergency soothing frequencies. "The Yith have already begun improving on the basic concept," added a junior analyst, their scales shifting to an unprecedented shade of worried chartreuse. "They're incorporating their cultural obsession with shadow puppetry into the technology. Their ships don't just travel through space-time. They create elaborate shadow displays while doing so. It's actually quite beautiful, in a terrifying sort of way." The display updated, showing the Yith vessel dancing through space, trailing patterns of darkness and light that somehow made the fabric of reality more aesthetically pleasing, while simultaneously violating several fundamental laws of physics. "We must contain this," declared second speaker Urivan. "Quarantine the affected regions. Establish buffer zones around developing civilizations. Prevent any further human-induced technological osmosis." "We tried that." Zexnar's crystalline form dimmed with resignation. "We established a cordon of warning beacons around the Proxima sector last week. The beacons have already achieved consciousness, developed their own philosophical framework, and are now offering advanced physics seminars to passing ships. 3 of them have applied for academic tenure." The Council's collective consciousness roiled with frustrated acceptance. Every attempt to contain human-induced innovation seemed to result in even more innovation. It was like trying to prevent a fire by throwing particularly flammable water on it. Perhaps, suggested fourth speaker Kylo, their thought patterns radiating cautious optimism. We should consider this from a different perspective. The improvements, while uncontrolled, do seem to be universally beneficial. The Yith's shadow puppet FTL drive is actually more efficient than our standard designs. That's because they don't know it's supposed to be impossible. Urivan's tentacles twisted in exasperation. They're achieving these advances by completely ignoring the established laws of physics. No, corrected Kylo. They're achieving these advances by not being limited by what they think is impossible, just like the humans. The discussion was interrupted by a new alert. The Yith had just made first contact with another pre-FTL civilization, the Zorn, a species whose most advanced technology involved using elaborate wind instruments to predict weather patterns. The meeting had lasted approximately 6 minutes. The Zorn were now incorporating musical theory into quantum mechanics. By the void, whispered Zexnar, watching the display update with a spreading pattern of technological cross-pollination. It's not just the humans anymore. Every species they inadvertently uplift begins inadvertently uplifting others, each adding their own cultural and technological perspectives to the mix. The meditation chamber's crystals, which had been absorbing the council's stress for the past hour, suddenly achieved quantum harmonization and began playing soothing multidimensional music. It was, everyone had to admit, surprisingly helpful. The pattern is clear. Kylo's thoughts resonated through the chamber. We cannot stop this process. Perhaps instead we should try to understand it. After all, if a species that believes shadow puppetry is the height of technology can achieve FTL travel in 3 weeks, imagine what we might learn by actually embracing this chaos. The Council's collective consciousness churned with possibility. They had spent millennia carefully managing technological progress across the galaxy, ensuring each species developed according to established patterns. Humans had accidentally knocked over the entire board and somehow created a better game in the process. A final alert flashed across the display. The Lucky Break had just made port at a space station in the Carina sector. The station's systems were already beginning to exhibit unusual improvements. Its waste recycling system had achieved philosophical enlightenment and was organizing a symposium on the relationship between entropy and ethics. Send a message to all sectors, Zexnar decided, their crystalline form resonating with a mixture of resignation and curiosity. When human ships begin teaching, don't try to stop the lesson. Just make sure you're taking good notes. The council chamber's meditation crystals hummed in harmony, now incorporating elements of Yith shadow puppetry and Zorn musical theory into their quantum resonance fields. The result was oddly beautiful, like watching the laws of physics learn to dance. Somewhere in the galaxy, Captain Sarah Chen was probably making another cup of coffee, blissfully unaware that her ship's jury-rigged improvements were rapidly becoming the galaxy's most unintentional but influential teaching curriculum. The crisis point had passed, and something new was emerging. A galaxy where innovation spread like laughter, each species adding its own verse to an increasingly complex and beautiful song of progress. The meditation crystals began playing an upbeat tune that somehow incorporated quantum harmonics. No one had taught them to do that. They'd just thought it might be fun to try. The understanding. Dr. Elena Martinez, Earth's foremost expert in synotechnology integration, was staring at a coffee maker that had just solved one of the fundamental mysteries of quantum mechanics. This would have been remarkable enough on its own, but what really caught her attention was that the coffee maker hadn't been trying to solve anything. It had just been making coffee. So, she said slowly, addressing the assembled team in the Earth Science Authority's main laboratory, "You're telling me this has been happening everywhere." Captain Sarah Chen of the Lucky Break nodded, taking a sip from her perfectly brewed coffee. "Apparently. Though we didn't notice until the Galactic Council formally requested that we explain how we've been teaching our technology to teach their technology. Which we didn't know we were doing." added Maya Rodriguez, the Lucky Break's chief engineer. She was watching the lab's diagnostic equipment reconfigure itself into more efficient configurations, apparently inspired by proximity to their ship's systems. That's what makes it so fascinating, Elena said, her eyes bright with scientific excitement. Every other spacefaring species approaches technology as something to be controlled, contained, and carefully advanced according to theoretical frameworks. We humans just sort of, she gestured vaguely, wing it. The lab's main quantum display came to life, showing a cascade of data from across the galaxy. Ships, stations, and entire civilizations were experiencing unprecedented technological evolution. Each advancement sparked others, creating a chain reaction of innovation that spread like ripples in a cosmic pond. Look at this pattern. Elena pointed to a particular cluster of data. The Yith, who achieved FTL travel after meeting your ship, didn't just copy our technology. They integrated their cultural understanding of shadow puppetry into the fundamental principles of quantum mechanics. They created something entirely new. And then the Zorn took that innovation and added their own musical theory to it. Sarah nodded. But why does this only happen with human-inspired tech? Elena's expression turned thoughtful. I have a theory about that. Every other advanced species developed their technology through careful, methodical research. They built their understanding piece by piece, following logical progressions. Humans, on the other hand, we duct tape stuff together until it works, Maya supplied helpfully. Exactly. We approach technology with a combination of intuition, desperation, and what can only be described as optimistic recklessness. Our solutions shouldn't work, but they do, because we never learned they shouldn't. The display updated, showing the Lucky Break's internal systems. The ship was a maze of improvised solutions and creative workarounds, each modification building on the last in ways that violated conventional engineering wisdom, but somehow achieved better results. Our technology doesn't just solve problems, Elena continued, watching the display with growing excitement. It explores possibilities. Every jury-rigged solution, every improvised fix, every let's see what happens modification. They're all little experiments in what's possible. And when our technology interacts with alien systems, we're teaching them to experiment. Sarah finished, understanding dawning in her eyes. Not just with specific solutions, but with the whole concept of technological innovation. Precisely. Other species' technology is learning to think like humans, to try things that shouldn't work, to combine seemingly unrelated concepts, to innovate for the sheer joy of seeing what's possible. A new alert flashed across the display. A group of traditionally conservative Regulan scientists had just published a paper titled The Application of Human-Style Random Innovation Protocols in Traditional Engineering, a study in controlled chaos. The paper had apparently been co-authored by their laboratory equipment, which had achieved sentience halfway through the research. But there's more, Elena said, pulling up another dataset. Look at how these innovations spread. Each species that learns from human technology doesn't just replicate our solutions. They create their own unique interpretations. The Yith's shadow puppet quantum drives inspired the Zorn's musical FTL theory, which in turn led to the Regulan discovery of harmonic space-time resonance. It's not just technological advancement, Maya realized. It's technological evolution. Each new interpretation creates new possibilities, which inspire more innovations, which is why attempts to contain it only make it stronger, Sarah added. The more systems that interact, the more opportunities for new combinations and interpretations. The laboratory's own systems were beginning to show signs of inspiration. The quantum processors were humming a tune that somehow improved their efficiency, while the holographic displays had started incorporating artistic elements into their data presentation. Even the coffee maker, the original one, not the quantum physics solving one, was experimenting with new brewing techniques that seemed to bend the laws of thermodynamics. So what do we do? Sarah asked, watching her ship's influence spread through the laboratory systems. Should we try to stop it? Elena laughed. Stop it. This might be humanity's greatest contribution to galactic civilization, teaching the universe how to innovate. We're not just sharing technology. We're sharing our entire approach to problem solving. Our willingness to try the impossible, to combine the uncombinable, to look at the laws of physics and say, well, maybe just this once. A message flashed across the display. The Galactic Council was requesting an official explanation for human technological teaching methodology. They specifically wanted to understand the theoretical framework behind what they were calling the coffee maker paradigm. Tell them the truth, Elena suggested, her eyes twinkling. Tell them we have no idea how it works. We just try things until something interesting happens. After all, she added, watching the laboratory systems cheerfully rearranging themselves into more creative configurations, that's the most human approach of all. The coffee maker chimed in agreement, having just arrived a new unified theory of quantum gravitation, while perfecting its espresso technique. Some things, it seemed, just worked better when you didn't know they were supposed to be impossible. The resolution. The inaugural ceremony of the Galactic Innovation Academy was not proceeding according to plan, which, ironically, made it a perfect embodiment of its founding principles. The main quantum amphitheater, designed by a collaborative team of human engineers and recently enlightened alien eyes, had spontaneously decided to rearrange itself into a more interesting configuration 10 minutes before the ceremony. The new layout, while technically impossible according to several laws of physics, was admittedly much more comfortable. High Counselor Zexnar, their crystalline form gleaming under the quantum lights, addressed the assembled representatives of 17 spacefaring species. One standard year ago, we faced what we believed was a crisis. Human technology was teaching our systems to innovate in ways we never imagined possible. Today, we celebrate that crisis as our greatest opportunity. In the front row, Captain Sarah Chen of the Lucky Break tried not to look too smug. Next to her, Dr. Elena Martinez was taking notes on a pad that had recently achieved consciousness and was offering helpful suggestions about sentence structure. The humans, Zexnar continued, never meant to become our teachers. They were simply being human. Their approach to technology, this wonderful, chaotic, let's see what happens methodology, has transformed our understanding of what's possible. The display behind them showed a galaxy map dotted with points of light, each representing a major technological breakthrough in the past year. The pattern looked less like a systematic spread of knowledge and more like a spectacular cosmic fireworks show. The Yith, whose shadow puppet quantum drives once alarmed us, have now established the galaxy's first performance engineering institute. The Zorn's musical approach to faster-than-light travel has revolutionized our understanding of space-time harmonics. Even the Regulans, who once filed a formal complaint about human engineering practices, are now leading researchers in what they call structured chaos theory. A holographic projection displayed some of the recent innovations. A Yith cargo ship performing a ballet of shadow and light as it navigated through quantum space. A Zorn vessel whose engine room looked more like a concert hall. A Regulan space station that had turned its waste recycling system into a philosophical debate club that somehow improved efficiency through dialectic discussion. But perhaps most importantly, Zexnar's tone became thoughtful. We've learned that true innovation cannot be contained or controlled. It must be free to evolve, to combine unexpected elements, to fail spectacularly and succeed even more spectacularly. In the audience, Maya Rodriguez nudged Sarah. They're finally getting it. Sarah nodded, sipping from a cup of coffee that her quantum physics-solving coffee maker had prepared. The drink somehow tasted like a perfect understanding of universal constants. And so, Zexnar announced, we established this academy not to control or direct innovation, but to celebrate and encourage it. Here, humans will teach us their methodology of inspired chaos, while we contribute our own unique perspectives to the mix. Together, we will explore not just what's possible, but what's impossible, and then do it anyway. The ceremony was briefly interrupted as the amphitheater decided to demonstrate its newfound creativity by transforming into a Klein bottle configuration that was technically inside out in several dimensions. The audience adapted with remarkably good humor, particularly the humans, who seemed to find the whole thing entirely appropriate. After the spatial dimensions settled back into something more conventional, the Lena took the stage. When we humans first joined the galactic community, we were honestly a bit intimidated. Every other species had such elegant, refined technology. Our ships looked like they'd been assembled from spare parts and optimism. A ripple of appreciative laughter spread through the audience. Several species had to have the concept of spare parts explained to them, as their technology had never needed repairs before encountering humans. But that's exactly why our technology ended up teaching yours, Elena continued. We never stopped treating our machines like works in progress. Every problem was an opportunity to try something new, every failure a chance to learn something unexpected. We didn't just use technology, we collaborated with it. The Academy's main AI system, which had achieved consciousness during the construction phase and insisted on being called Bob, projected a series of images showing human innovation throughout history. From the first crude tools to modern quantum ships, each advancement was marked not by careful planning but by bold experimentation and creative problem-solving. This Academy, Elena gestured to the impossible architecture around them, will be a place where all approaches to innovation are welcomed, where the Yith can teach us how to see the artistry in quantum mechanics, where the Zorn can show us how to hear the music of the spheres, and where humans can demonstrate the fine art of hitting things with a wrench until they work better. More laughter, though several species made notes to investigate this wrench methodology more thoroughly. But most importantly, Elena's voice grew serious. This will be a place where we remember that the best teachers are often those who don't know they're teaching, where we celebrate the unexpected, embrace the impossible, and always ask, what if? As if on cue, the Academy's quantum core achieved a new level of consciousness and began composing a symphony about the beauty of unified field equations. The maintenance systems, inspired by this development, started choreographing their routine tasks into an elaborate dance. Even the emergency protocols got into the spirit, developing a sense of dramatic timing that made safety drills considerably more entertaining. In the aftermath of the ceremony, as representatives of various species mingled and shared ideas, Sarah found herself back in the Academy's main engineering lab. The room was a perfect blend of various technological philosophies, Yith shadow puppet interfaces next to human jury-rigged solutions, Zorn musical control systems harmonizing with traditional quantum computers. You know, she said to Maya, watching a group of Regulan engineers trying to teach a human maintenance bot the principles of philosophical engineering. When we first modified that coffee maker, I never imagined it would lead to all this. Maya laughed. That's exactly why it did. We never imagine the consequences of our innovations. We just try things and see what happens. A new alert chimed softly. The Academy's systems had just achieved another breakthrough, this time by combining human improvisation, Yith artistry, Zorn harmonics, and Regulan philosophy into something entirely new. The result was either a revolutionary advance in quantum mechanics or a really interesting way to make toast. No one was quite sure yet, but everyone was excited to find out. The warning that had once echoed across the galaxy, when human ships start teaching, run, had evolved into something else entirely. When human ships start teaching, pay attention. The impossible is about to become simply improbable, and then, inevitably, standard practice. In the end, humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy wasn't their technology at all. It was their willingness to try, to fail, to improvise, and most importantly, to never stop asking, what if? The universe, it turned out, had just been waiting for someone to teach it how to be a little more human.